Hello, everyone. Welcome to Allview. At Allview, we chat with industry leaders, get to know their opinions and insights, and hear their views. May they be popular, unpopular, brand new, alternative, or anything in between. I'm your host, Yaoqi from Aulia, an elastic execution layer on Ethereum for Web3. Today, I'm super glad to have Arnold from the blog Research. Arnold has been involved in crypto research since 2020. His research mainly focuses on blockchain scaling technology and also zero-knowledge projects. Hi, Arnold. Thanks for joining us on Allview. I really appreciate it. And why don't you start off by telling us a little bit more about your background and also your research at the blog?
Hi, Yaoqi. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And first, I would just like to say that it's a great honor to be invited here and share my opinion with you guys. Yeah, so a bit about me. I started my crypto journey in 2020 when I first bought my first Bitcoin, and then from there, I started delving into the technological aspects of blockchain technology as well as cryptography, and afterwards, somewhere in mid 2020, I managed to land an intern role at the blog as an intern researcher, and from there, I guess my research career just kind of grew, and at the blog, I slowly found myself gravitating towards blockchain scaling solutions, because I'm very interested in them. And yeah, I just started to look at rollups, sharding, and just basically the different mechanisms in which blockchains can scale.
Yeah, sounds great. And as we know, right, 2 weeks ago, you released the article called Rollups-as-a-Service, right? Which is sort of one of the very first few articles talking about RaaS. And basically, the Rollup-as-a-Service got a lot of traction these days. And in your opinion, how do you define RaaS and why do we need RaaS in general?
Right. So that's a deep question. I would say that the term RaaS wasn't actually coined by me. I've actually heard it from some of the other analysts that I talked to, and basically a lot of them were just talking about different rollups project and how all these projects allow a developer to just spin up their own rollup and just utilize their framework as a form of baseline, and shares a common settlement layer so they don't have to worry about security. Basically, the idea of RaaS, or at least from what I gather, is that they're just trying to abstract away all the complexities of having to run your own blockchain, trying to bootstrap your own network, and just letting a developer just build up on the execution environment itself. So I guess that's how I would define RaaS, right? Basically you're providing all the services required for a developer to just run an execution environment. And if you can do all that for a developer, then yeah, I guess that makes you a RaaS. As for why we need them, I think based off the traction that you started to see late last year and early this year, it's quite obvious that many of the use cases in blockchains are very narrow because of the speeds at which the speeds as well as the fees of the transacting on chain. So I think when it comes to things perp trading or games, some developers might choose to have a more optimal design, and therefore they want to have an execution environment that suits their needs as well as the needs of their users. So inevitably they will turn to RaaS as a solution for scaling their applications.
Yeah, that's so true. Especially in your article, right? You mentioned a bunch of projects, also including us. So I think for RaaS, the end goal probably, as you mentioned, right, is just to build some easy or convenient to use for developers to quickly spin off the L2 infrastructure for them to build some scalable applications on top of it. Yeah. So, like once we have RaaS or rollup as a service, like are there any new use cases or applications we can expect in the future by using these kind of RaaS systems?
Well, I think generally speaking, the new use cases so far would be very difficult to tell. Although my best guess would be you're looking at a lot of Web2 applications that are trying to like decentralize themselves now. For example, social media, right? In general, I would say that like the state of like Web2 media is set for disruption, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these social media companies are, huge places where they are venues where advertisers go to, and all of most, if not all, most of the revenue, uh, sometimes don't get passed on to the content creators.
Yeah.
And I guess, while that's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, I think the industry is so-called ripe for disruption. However, if you were just to, run like a decentralized version of Instagram or Facebook on Ethereum, like that would be very costly, right? And if you were to put it on like some generic rollup like Arbitrum or
Mm-hmm.
Optimism, like you're gonna clog up the blockchain for a lot of the other users. So these I would expect like these applications will eventually move on to their own like rollup where they
Mm-hmm.
can settle on like a secure layer like Ethereum. So like maybe they will build a rollup on top of Ethereum. But like as with this call, like we're discussing rollup as a service, they might also turn
Mm-hmm.
to this RaaS to build their own rollups, right? Because it might be so much more easier for them to just leverage RaaS instead of building their own rollup on Ethereum. And I think the main to answer the question, right? Like, what are some of these new applications, right? Uh, I would say that they are generally applications that require fast throughput, and they are currently looking to be decentralized. So I give them an example, but like as for whether more of them might pop up in the future, it's hard for me to say today.
Yeah, that's true. I would say like especially for social application, right? These days, either Jack Dorsey or even Elon Musk, they are trying to find new ways to like either to decentralize the existing social infrastructure or basically trying to sponsor some new protocols to help to build the next generation social applications. I believe with RaaS or this kind of platform, right, we can sort of like a similar experience of AWS in the Web3. So application developers can just focus on their business logic development instead of like really bootstrap or build the infrastructure from scratch. So it will be super convenient for them to have a dedicated layer to handle the requests from the users, and at the same time, like to provide better user experience. For example, the account abstraction, or can even get rid of the gas for some of the application like social application or games. Yeah. Beyond that, we know that in your article, right, you also mentioned about this customizable execution environment, because I believe for a lot of these L2s, they also provide some other virtual machine or environment to execute a contract or programs, right? So how can this customizable execution environment help the Web3 applications? And what should one look out for in this case, and what are the pros and cons? Yeah.
Yeah, so the term customizable execution environments was something that like I thought about, and I used because I think it's a good summary for what a lot of these rollups actually are. So basically, when we talk about uh, just spinning up like a rollup, uh, basically what you're trying to build is a place where applications can just execute the code. And
Mm-hmm.
why these customizable execution environments are important is because if you were to have a single execution environment, you're not going to get the most optimal performance, right? Because you might have a DEX like Uniswap that facilitates large volumes and large trades on Ethereum, and because of that, gas fees, even though they can go really high, it's a small percentage of trade volume. But if you were to run like perp DEX on Ethereum, if you're running like a small trade with a very small margin that has a high leverage, well, that doesn't make sense to run on Ethereum because the high gas fees is going to eat into the small margin that you put in. So what I've just said is a good example of why a single execution environment is not going to work out for all the different applications. So what should one look out for in this case? Well, you're going to be looking out for environments that are built to withstand the demand of the application. So I believe generic rollups, they are pretty straightforward, but you have like roll apps, I think, from like there's a Dimension by Cosmos. A lot of them are just building like a framework in which basically you can spin up like an execution environment and customize it to the way you want. Now, I would say RaaS is like a bigger version of this, right? Because RaaS actually talks about settlement, but CEE, I'm just gonna shorten it. CEE, like for short, is a place where, or like a framework where you talk about how you tweak the parameters of an execution layer so that the application can perform best. And if we were to talk about the pros and cons, I think I've been talking about the pros about CE so far, right? As for the cons, the one greatest con that come with like using CEE is that like you're gonna pass off all of the security assumption to the underlying like settlement layer, and that is very important, right? That's why RaaS is so important, because when you just spin up an execution environment, like you assume that like the settlement layer will be secure enough, but as a developer, I can't just assume, right? So where RaaS steps in is that like if we build like a common settlement layer for this these different rollups, like we abstract away that concern, right? Like multiple rollups can have a shared settlement layer and not worry about it because that settlement layer has a certain amount of economic value that's securing it. So I guess that's where CEE and RaaS are tied in together, right? Like they complement each other.
I see. Yeah, so as we all know, right? Right now, like you're doing a lot of research around these roll-up solutions, and in the current space, we have two directions. One is optimistic roll-up, and the other one is the ZK roll-up, right? What do you think about the progress of these two directions so far? Like, I'm sure you've been following all the on-chain activities or different L2s, right? Optimism, Arbitrum, or ZK Sync. Yeah, based on these on-chain activities, like what kind of trends are we like sort of uncovering from this about the growth of this ecosystem? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the debate between optimistic rollups and ZK rollups have been, very, very hotly debated. Like it's a very like I would say deeply researched space. I think that the progress of the two of them have been very clear in the sense that optimistic rollups are going for compatibility, right? They're just trying to make sure that like Optimism have the EVM equivalents. Arbitrum is trying to like make it easy for app developers to onboard. Basically, it's just to become a cheaper, faster version of Ethereum, right? As for ZK rollups, I think it's very clear that they are going with a more optimal, like optimized approach. They want to make sure that like we can handle scaling at the highest levels. You can look at DYDX, you can look at ZK Sync. They are all trying to reach a level at which we say, you know what, we can start to rival, the traditional institutions in terms of transaction per second, right? And the best way to do it is to have like a very robust ZK tech underlying the rollup. Like that's the best way they can see, right? So I think when we look at these things, I would say that like the trends that evolve from these directions For the optimistic rollup side, it's hard to say, right? Like because many of them are just going with like the call data compression methods. They're going with like I think Optimism have their Bedrock upgrade, and it's just to make the environment, the OP stack more customizable. So I guess when we talk about the trends in the optimistic rollup space, it's hard to say for now, exactly where they're gonna go. It's still pretty much an open book. But I think when it comes to ZK rollup, the trend is very obvious that many of them are going for the ZK EVM narrative. Right, you have a lot of ZK rollups that are trying to build like EVM compatible version and try to onboard applications from Ethereum. But I guess in the long run, these trends can change, and in general, I would say that like when the narrative is there, like it makes sense for these rollup developers to follow the narrative, because at the end of the day, a rollup is only as robust as the tech as well as the size of its community, size of the ecosystem, which is dependent on the users. So if you choose to go against the narrative, like you're taking the risk that you either you set a new trend or you fade out into the background. So with that, I think that like for both optimistic rollups and ZK rollups, like the trends will continue to diverge, and we'll likely see a more vibrant divergence of divergence of approach in which these rollups develop as we move ahead.
Yeah, that's so true, especially when you are mentioning about the like sort of the community friendly approach, right? For both directions. It'll be great, like we can really make it like a developer friendly. That's why either for optimistic rollup or ZK rollup, everyone wants to be EVM compatible or even EVM equivalent. So in that case, basically it's quite non-intrusive for developer to migrate their Solidity contracts to the L2 solutions. Yeah, another thing, as you just mentioned, right? As we all know, like security and decentralization are basically the basic properties for most of the L1 and L2s. But in your article about rollups, right, you say that decentralization is not necessarily always optimal. Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on this part? Yeah.
Right. So when I said that decentralization is not necessarily optimal, it's because I think it has been shown over time that no matter how much you try to like speed up a blockchain, there will always be some form of trade-off. So we can see, like, I think the best example is Solana with like its fast block speeds and fast confirmation times, but eventually they had issues whereby the blockchain goes down because the validators are just not able to support the throughput of the transactions. Now I think this is not to say that Solana doesn't work. I think Solana is a great blockchain, and like they have its own target audience, but I think we must understand that like in order for Solana to deliver on that level of speed, it needed to sacrifice some form of decentralization. And if we were to look closer at some of like the scaling solutions today, whether you look at Polygon, if you look at Arbitrum, if you look at DYDX, all of them have certain level of centralization. Now, does that make it bad? I don't think so. I think that the users who are using these rollups or solutions, like they understand, or at least they will eventually understand after using for a while. If you want these speeds, then you need to be okay with a certain level of trade-off, right? So if you want for leverage trading, right, and you want that of self-custody, right, then you're gonna have to face the fact that like sequencer is relatively centralized, right? If you want to use Polygon for its cheap fees, well, then you're also having to deal with the fact that the Polygon validator pool is a lot smaller than Ethereum's. So I'm not saying that you should always be okay with centralization, but I think that if we are talking about scaling blockchains, at some point in time we'll need to trade off. We'll need to sacrifice centralization, right? We need to sacrifice decentralization, I mean, and we have to be okay with that. As a user, we have to evaluate, like, is the trade-off in decentralization worth the reduction in cost, the increase in speed? Like, I think these are things that, like, a user, a developer should think about when they make their choices in terms of which rollups they want to use or how they want to design the rollup.
Yeah, so basically there's no silver bullet, I mean, on the scaling solutions. There always a compromise among, like, sort of security, decentralization, and also the performance, right? So what we can do basically is just provide more options for the users or developers so they can choose based on their use case or scenarios. And regarding the scaling solutions, right? We all know that like there are sharding app chains and also rollup, right? How do you feel about them regarding the progress of the deliverables for the past few years? Yeah, so we know that a lot of these terms, right? They came up 6 or even 7 years ago, and right now, if you look at the current blockchain space, right? Probably only like the app chains and rollup sort of deliver some of the like sort of SDKs or source code, right? But in general, based on your experience and also your observations, overall, how do you feel about the progress for all different approaches?
Well, I think that all the approaches have their own merits. In terms of their progress, how I feel is that it's great to see L2's rollup starting to gain some level of attention, some level of traction, and in terms of, like, shard chains or like app chains, also starting to see some degree of, like, traction. But I think rollups definitely take center stage here, and the reason for that is because app chains are still a relatively newer, like, idea. So I don't think that there are app chains out there which have started to become dominant in their market share. As for shard chains, I think just to be blunt, most of the sharding solutions today still very much rely on having, like, one shard that handles most of the transactions, right? So I think that sharding itself is a very useful concept, and is gonna be very crucial for Ethereum's 2.0 when they start launching their shard chain for data availability. Like, the shard chains of today will serve as a very good precursor for what might happen. But if we're just talking about the shard chains that have already been implemented and, like, they are existing today, I would say that by and far, like, they most of them do follow, like, the L1 narrative, right? Like, they had, like, a period of a lot of activity, and then afterwards, when the bull market comes down, the TVL as well as the on-chain activity, on-chain metrics all just start spiraling. And with most other L1s, it is not like shard chains are worse. It's pretty much the same. So I think with regards to that, how I feel is that rollups will most likely take the center stage moving forward.
Yeah, that's so true, especially right now, right? We have so many, like, teams or projects working on new solutions, either for a general purpose or application-specific rollup solutions. And as you can see, right, with more application chains or rollups coming out, what are the extra or new features do you like to see from them, apart from the high TPS or EVM compatibility?
Yeah, so I actually think because some of my research have actually gone into like the space of like KYC,
Mm-hmm.
or you could have for more privacy, you say ZK KYC, right? Whereby
Yeah.
you can like prove your identity with like a validity proof instead of having to show your identity. And I think that it'll be very interesting to see rollups having like a ZK KYC like opt-in kind of function whereby you have rollups that maybe all of these rollups are under a single umbrella, right? And then like some of them you can only access if like you have a ZK KYC from a particular jurisdiction, right? So like in order to get that through, you probably need some form of regulatory body to come in, to
Mm-hmm.
attest that the KYC is indeed like true. And I think that that is actually a very it's a very careful way in which regulations can come in, you know, without exposing much of like a user's privacy. And it's a very opt-in, opt-out basis. Like basically, if you want access to like a roll-up and its ecosystem, right? And there's like a requirement for KYC, then
Mm-hmm.
you have to adhere, right? But otherwise, you always have the option of like uh going to a non KYC required rollup. And why that's so important, I feel, is because let's just say, for example, you're a regulator and you want to like enter space, like you can't just say, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, and then like expect everything to work out, right? Like if you have a KYC rollup environment, I think it's more practicable. Like it's a more achievable goal, and like you can actually enforce the regulations in such an environment, right? Like I feel like that might be the first step towards like actually having some form of on-chain regulation. And I think that that would be something that would be very interesting because I for one believe that the blockchain space should be regulated. It's not with like an iron fist, but like more of like a step-by-step basis. And like I think this might be a very good way to do that.
Yeah, this view is quite like sort of new to a lot of these I mean developers in space because we've been discussion with a lot of like I mean projects, especially the privacy project, right? They want to provide some sort of verifiable computation environment for a lot of applications. In that case, so either the sort of the contract or the program can be verified by developers. It can probably also by some authorities. As you mentioned, like QIC is definitely one of the applications in their scope. Yeah, so we always end with one more question, like do you perhaps have any sort of alternative or overview of the existing L2 or rollup space right now, or perhaps for the industry in general? Uh,
Right. I think I'm not sure if this is an alt view, right? Like, but like it's definitely a less common view, which
yeah.
is I think optimistic rollups won't die. Uh, I
Mm-hmm.
believe when I talk to other analysts, many of them would be like, oh, optimistic rollups wins for now, but
Mm-hmm.
eventually ZK rollups will catch up and overtake
I
them.
see.
Well, I personally don't think so because with from what I've researched thus far, I think
Mm-hmm.
that the idea of using fraud proof is
Mm-hmm.
pretty much arbitrary, right? Like in the sense that like you're just trying to find like fraudulent transactions
Yeah.
over like a specific window. But I think there is a branch of research that goes into how we can have like hybrid rollups. Like
Yeah.
basically, you could have like proof window until the ZK proof is generated and
Yeah.
then posted on chain. And then once the ZK proof is posted on chain, like it becomes valid. So then you don't have to wait for the fraud proof to you don't have to wait for 7 days to withdraw. Like you only need to wait for the proof generation times. And then like if you don't want to wait for that, you can always withdraw earlier for maybe like a fee and like there could be like a market for that. But with respect to that, I think in general it's just that like a lot of people are looking at it as if it's like a optimistic rollup versus ZK rollup. But I don't think that's the case, right? Like I think that if we were to view like rollups as like a general concept and like fraud proofs and validity proofs as like another type of concept, right? Then like it becomes clear that like okay, moving forward, you might see rollups leveraging both fraud proofs and validity proofs. Now, then that becomes like what like a ZKOR, like you know, it's just I would say it's just like a more interesting way of looking at how you use technology instead of just saying, oh, you know, Arbitrum's going to win ZK Sync or like ZK Sync will eventually overtake Arbitrum, that kind of things. Like, I don't feel like it's that's the case, right? Like, it's not a competition, like in that sense. It's more of like a collaboration. Like, all of this is just to, you know, increase to advance like blockchain technology. So I guess that is my view. I don't know if it's really an odd view, but it's just like a less common view.
Yeah, but I think it's a really nice view, I would say, because like especially right now the for ZK rollup, right? You know, the proof generation time is a little bit long. It probably can take a few hours or even few days. During that window, as you mentioned, right, we can just combine optimistic rollup and also ZK rollup. Just make sure like either if you really believe in the proof, ZK proof, you can just wait for the proof to be generated and verified on chain, or you can just in an optimistic way, right? So you just assume all the sequencers can generate the right blocks. And in addition, right, Vitaly also mentioned that we can also put some extra governance if there's some extra dispute on this proof verification on the L1. Yeah, but in general, I think it's a really cool view. And yeah, to all the listeners, I really appreciate your time. And yeah, thanks again. Like, thanks, Arnold, for coming here and to give us a lot of nice sharings about the Rollup-as-a-Service and also the progress in the rollup space in general. And in the coming months, right, we will be talking about more experts on the industry L2's scaling solutions. And just feel free to subscribe our channel. And meanwhile, we are waiting like sort of for the next guest to share a little bit more on either the rollup or on some other new topics. Yeah, thanks again. And yeah, we're signing off till the next time.